was speechless, looking at the mural. Pei Ming commented, "He can do that. Why not?" Hua Chang countered. Everyone looked to him, and Hua Chang continued, "Isn't appointing generals just bringing mortals to the heavenly realm? If he's just pulling everyone within the vicinity of the royal capital to the heavens temporarily, and once the disaster is over, sending them back, why can't he do it?" "Crimson Rain sought flower. Don't make this sound so easy," Pei Ming said. "My lord should know, appointing generals takes spiritual power. This is how many he's appointing." To appoint generals, in reality, was to use one's own spiritual power to nurture a mortal in the heavens, to be used by oneself. Otherwise, if there was no restriction, why wouldn't every heavenly official just appoint all the people they wanted? Why wouldn't an emperor just bring up his entire harem and his entire court, and a general might as well appoint his entire army? Judging by the relics left behind, the entirety of the kingdom of Wuyang was only about 100,000 in population. The vicinity of the royal capital was probably only about 10,000. Shilian said quietly, "It might be tough, but it's still doable, though just barely. Even if it's only tens of thousands, there's still no heavenly official who dare appoint that many. If he really went through with it, then I can't tell if he should be congratulated on his courage or extreme stupidity. At least, there's definitely no other like him in history," Pei Ming said. Shilian studied that bridge on the mural, completely engrossed. In his eyes, the faces of that white-clad crown prince and his 4 guardian deputies were looking more and more peculiar, more and more like his own face and the faces of his 4 Guoshe. He then recalled the celestial phase of that ominous star. The story that was so much like the tale of reincarnation made him eager to learn what happened next, but at the same time, he felt perhaps he already knew. He didn't dare to keep looking at that mural anymore, and he turned away. He asked, "Has water been found?" Banyue was dragging Pei Su and replied, "That Gurkha went to look." She was referring to Yin Yu. Shilian glanced at Pei Su, who had his eyes closed. Humming for a moment, he still decided to speak up. "I think when we go onwards toward the kiln later, it'd be best if General Pei Jr. should stay here." Pei Su was, after all, in the body of a mortal, inconvenient in many ways. Besides, they still didn't know what awaited them ahead. Pei Ming squatted down and looked Pei Su over. "Yeah, I agree, but will your highness please not tell him the reason in front of him? This child will understand. Just leave it to me to tell him." "Rest assured, General Pei, I understand," Shilian said. "Otherwise, I wouldn't have said it while he's still unconscious." Pei Su was once a young martial god with an infinitely bright future in the heavens, after all. Now that he was to stay behind because he couldn't keep up, he'd feel bitter. However, mistakes must be punished. This was how exile should feel, and so he could only accept it. They remained in the temple and discussed for another while. Shilian wondered, puzzled. Where's Yin Yu? How come he hasn't come back for so long? Has he not found water yet? Hua Chang, on the other hand, was staring intently at a few wraith butterflies that were resting on his fingertips. The butterflies were very useful earlier, and now they'd all returned to him, tucked away to save energy. He looked up slightly. He shouldn't take this long. Shilian grew alarmed and stood up. "Let me go take a look. General Pei, watch over things here. Sanlang, come with me. Of course, they would go together. Thus, Shilin left Roya behind and had her tie a protection circle. The two left the temple and went toward the deeper part of the underground city. There were plenty of houses and clutters of things on the way. Shilin picked up a jar that he rather liked, and He Chang seemed to have found it funny. "What are you doing, picking that up?" he asked. "If we find water later, we can use this to bring some back for General Pei Jr., Shilin said. He'd gotten used to collecting scraps after all, and he patted the jar in his hands in spite of himself. Come to think of it, this is an antique, thousands of years old. He Chang laughed and said, "If you like stuff like this, come over to my place after. I've got a few items too, and you can see if you find anything you like." An incense time later, the two finally heard the faint sound of water flowing. Soon after, Shilin exclaimed, "Over there!" There was indeed a hidden river at the bottom. Shilin placed that jar he picked up in the water and started washing it heartily. Thousands of years' worth of ashes had already formed a thick shell. It couldn't be washed off, but just washing off the dust on the surface of the jar would still make it possible for use. He filled it with water and lowered his head, ready to take a sip himself, when He Chang, who was surveying the area, turned and saw him. He immediately cautioned, "Don't drink it." Shilin had already put his face to the jar, but when he heard the caution to stop, he was confused. "What?" Just then, a voice said, "So hot." There were only the two of them here, so where did this third voice come from? Shilin unconsciously looked to where the voice came from, and that voice was coming from the jar in his hand. He instantly looked down. In the jar were two small scarlet red dots floating in the water, watching him. What was that thing? No matter how he looked, it was a pair of eyes. The moment those eyes met his, that thing bolted straight for Shilin's face. Splash, splash, the water splashed, and Shilin's hands moved swiftly, flinging that jar meters away in an instant. It smashed against the wall, and with a clunk, the thousands-year-old antique shattered. As for the thing that was hidden inside, it took no time to scurry off into the darkness. In that rush, Shilin didn't see what it was clearly, only that it was a big bundle of something black. "What was that thing?" he asked. He Chang was shielding in front of him, and Shilin was feeling a little woeful. "It wasn't in that jar before, was it?" "No," He Chang said. "It swam into it from the water." There are often creatures that flock together and swim in this hidden river. That's why I told you not to drink it. But you'd let General Pei Jr. drink it, Shilin thought inwardly. Suddenly, he felt a chill on his back. He shouted, "Who's there?" In an instant just now, he heard someone cough in the distance. It definitely wasn't a delusion, and he immediately tensed in alert. Soon after, babble and chatter came pouring in like the tide. From all around the two of them, pair after pair of red dots lit up and surrounded them, encircling them in the middle. "Don't worry, they're not human," He Chang said. "It's precisely because they're not human that we have to worry, all right," Shilin thought. Listening closely to the chatter, Shilin deduced what those voices were saying. Cough, cough, cough. So hot, so hot. I'm burning. I'm suffocating. Is anyone there? I can't move. Can't move. Those voices were tiny, but clear and full of pain, like little ants crawling into his ears. Shilin was just ready to reach for Feng Xin when a voice cried sharply, "Your Highness, where's your Highness? Save me, save me." That last cry made all the hairs on Shilian's neck stand up, and in that instant, he thought that that voice was calling for him. However, Hua Chang waved his hand, releasing thousands of wraith butterflies, and they charged at those glowing red eyes. Where the silver butterflies shimmered their light, they illuminated the countless creatures that were chattering in the dark. Sure enough, they weren't human. They were rats. Hua Chang grabbed for him and said, "I've said, there's a lot of rats here. Let's go." Shilian was stunned as he walked. Why do they look more like cats to me? It was true. Those rats were each bigger than a kitten, their hairs black like ink and thick like needles. Their red eyes glowed aggressively in the dark, and many were perched on the walls, watching them closely, speaking the tongue of men, creepy to the extreme. Once the silver butterflies charged at them, they started slaughtering one another. The red and silver lights flashed and crossed, the state of the battle unknown, but very much vicious and violent. Yin Yu couldn't have been dragged off somewhere by those creatures, could he? Shilian wondered. He shouldn't be that useless. It's probably something else that's tripped him up, Hua Chang replied. The first part made Shilian relax slightly, but the last part made him tense again. Never mind how big the rats are, but why are there so many? What do they eat to grow so big? Simple, Hua Chang replied. The dead, of course. Those are all corpse-eating rats. It turns out, when the city was covered by volcanic ash, the people and large domestic beasts like oxen, horses, lambs, and so on had nowhere to hide. But the rats dug deeply into the underground and depended on the air and stored sustenance in the caves in order to survive. Once the dust had settled, they emerged from the holes anew and scoured the now hellish city for food. However, everything was destroyed. Everything was either buried by lava or covered in volcanic ash. They gnawed through many things, but couldn't find food for the longest time. Until one day, they smelled the scent of rot. The rotten smell came from those humanoid stone statues. Some corpses were wrapped in a thinner layer of that ashen shell, and when they started to rot, they wafted a funny stench, and corpse water flowed. Thus, the starving rats surrounded and bustled next to the statues, biting through small holes and scurrying inside, gnawing at the corpses within. The lowest and scummiest of creatures were often those that survived the longest. The corpses of the dead were wrapped in those ashes, and their terror, rage, frustrations, and other such powerful emotions were also wrapped within. When those rats ate their corpse bodies, those emotions were eaten too, and they could start speaking the human tongue, expressing what those people had wanted to say at the moment of their death, but couldn't. Shilian was enlightened. I see. That's why they would say those things. I was wondering why they would say such words. Yet, unexpectedly, Hua Chang suddenly asked, "What did you say?" Shilian blinked. "What did I say?" Hua Chang stared at him. "What did they say? What did you hear?" "Sun Lang, you didn't hear?" Shilian said. "They said just, so hot, it's suffocating, can't move, save me, and such." However, before Hua Chang said anything, it dawned on Shilian. That wasn't right. What those corpse-eating rats repeated was the hatred of the Wuyong people, so naturally it would be in the Wuyong tongue. So why could he understand the Wuyong tongue?